you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm. If your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Chappie, my boy, on with the show.
Avast, me hearties. 2 hours ahead of our standard live streaming launch time. Here we are, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time out on the west coast of the Americas. I guess that would make it 9 out on the east coast, of course. This week's guest, William Ramsey, had requested that we kick things off in early fashion so that he could work on having a little more quality time with his family after we wrap things up. So, of course, we're always happy to do whatever we can to try and accommodate our guests. Here we are. I myself, of course, am your host, as always, the Robin Hood's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. This is episode number 146 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. And as was stated, we do have William Ramsey returning once again. It's been a number of months here. Of course, regular listeners will know and be quite familiar with his biography, more or less. Published author, of course, Los Angeles-based lawyer, documentary filmmaker, podcaster, and just generally, it seems, a jack of all trades. Got a lot of things going on. So, William, I'm not sure if there's much that I left out there, anything more you'd like to add, but welcome back to the Robin Hood.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, the last couple shows that we have done over the past few years, and just in the lead up to things here, we were discussing, trying to rack our brains as to when the first actual show was that we put together. Is back in, it looks like May of 2016, if I've got things straight here. So
yes.
We've covered Crowley in as direct a fashion as we could possibly manage, of course, and you've written a couple of books dealing with the man.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yes.
And the West Memphis 3 murders. What else did we have there? There was a couple. Why am I mind dumping right now when I should be? What else did we?
Did we talk about the Smiley Faced Killers?
We did.
I think we talked
Sure.
about that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And there's one that I'm missing out on, which I don't know. I guess I'll have to go back into the.
So I did Occult Hollywood. I also did Occult 9/11. I did Aleister Crowley. There's actually a documentary of my book out there that I did 10 years ago. So there's 3 documentaries out, but and 4 books. So. Do you hear that reverb? I'm getting I
do, actually, and I'm just checking what we've got on the go here. I'm thinking it might be from my end. No, it doesn't look like it is. So that's probably coming through on your end of things. Unless, hang on just a second now. That intro might have been a little rough as far as the listeners were concerned. I had an extra channel open here. That could be the reason behind why we were hearing that. So I've just shut that down here via the OBS. But welcome aboard. We've got already a handful of our... Actually, well, my echo kind of delay voice was bleeding through there. Now we've got some action out there in the streets of Los Angeles. A little bit of drag racing taking place from the sounds of things.
Right.
So
that's what happens when you live close to the street.
That's right.
But I still hear the delay.
That's really. You're right, and I don't know why that could be exactly. Although, I'll just check and see. No.
It was definitely on my side.
Pretty sure. Yeah, I'm looking everything over. It's not coming through in a big way. I can kind of hear it faintly there in the background from
I
time
have
to
the
time.
live stream open, so is my phone.
There we go. All right. Okay. Well, we're off to the races here, folks. Welcome once again, episode 146 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. We've got the next approximate 90 minutes with return guest William Ramsey. So the focus for this conversation is Hollywood Babylon. He himself has put a film together. It was about 10 years ago now, Occult Hollywood. We'd kind of like to take a look at these areas a little closely, of course. There's a lot going on there within the context of Pizzagate. That was the other show that we did, William, that I left out of the picture.
Gotcha.
Sure. So I'm sure it'll come back again at some point here over the course of our talk, but I really don't want to spend too much time on it unless it directly applies to what we see.
I don't have anything new about Pizzagate. You know, I don't think anything's changed. It was never really properly investigated. So.
Right. Yeah. So, and before we really get too much further into things, we've got as many of your links as we could possibly track down here once again in the show description area there. So I'm not sure if you want to just add to that in any fashion or not, but people can quite easily find you via social media just following up on those links. So and an email address, I believe. Why don't you just break your web pages down and emails?
Yeah, I'm on all over Minds. I'm on MeWe now, Facebook, Twitter. William Ramsey, Occult 911, I think, is and you can send me email to occultinvestigations@gmail.com if you're interested. But yeah, I have to restart my website. I just have to redo it. So nothing on that front. Just don't feel too inspired having to deal with that all the time. So.
Occult Investigations, yeah, I was just by there the other day, and it seems it hasn't been updated in about a year or so. You've probably been too busy with the podcast and a lot of other things, of course.
I think busy, but also just don't feel like dealing with it. Actually, what happened is I was selling my books off of there, and I was just running to the post office twice a week. You know, after a while, I just got exhausted. Didn't want to go stand in line at the post office. I don't ship enough books to have it done, so I just have Amazon ship it out. And
I think, actually, speaking of your books, you did mention last time we had a bit of a deal in place, something like a 10% discount, if I'm not mistaken, with Pirate Radio Podcasts. We had that up on the WPRPN.com via the master link there, the main website. Do you remember anything along those lines?
I do. Absolutely I do.
So if people maybe are interested, I'm not sure if your game, again, we can try that though, and leave that up for grabs if people are wanting to get their hands on some of the books that you've put out there. Close to almost half a dozen now, isn't it?
I'm at 4. So yeah, it's I think the first one I published was 2010. So. Seems like every couple years, I drop a new book. So, but I kind of moved away from books. My last one was a documentary. I'm very proud of the Smiley Faced Killer documentary. So, which you can see on Vimeo right now if people are interested.
That really took a lot of heat and attracted a lot of attention. It's a bit of a side note here and a distraction, although there could be something of a tie-in as well, too, with respect to what some affectionately refer to as #Hollyweird. But, there was, over the course of about a week last year, we suddenly were bombarded with just a whole number of new subscriptions to our channel, and lo and behold, each and every single one of them, what did they do? They went on to the YouTube show that we had in place there and just spammed with their criticism and just really they were trolls basically.
Trolling.
So, and I think we talked about that. I'm not sure if you recall this or not.
I do. Uh-huh.
Do you remember what you said?
That happens to me all the time. I mean, are they the same people? Well, what did I say? No, what did I say?
Oh, you just asked me. You said, "Well, why do you think that's happening?" And my only response was because what you're putting out there is real. You've hit the nail right on the head, and they don't like it.
Yeah, I still have that position. I still have that opinion, no doubt.
Well, there you go. So they definitely.
It's an important documentary. People need to see it because their friends and loved ones could become victims to this kind of group that abducts young men, holds them for a time, then murders them, possibly ritualistically, dumps them in water, and then the local authorities will not investigate. They won't even cover it up. They'll just omit it. They'll just say it was an accidental drowning, even though the person was missing for 40 days, 30 days, when the average body floats to the surface in 3 days, and you'll be in the very bitter position of burying a loved one that was murdered. So, I mean, it's a serial killing that's still going on to this day. So, I don't see anybody from any law enforcement agency press putting out a warning. And all of their so-called debunking of this phenomenon are some of the shoddiest critical thinking and logical misstatements that you could ever read. It's just they don't even know the facts. So, and what's really terrifying, and should terrify everybody, is that they don't want to know the facts, and they don't want to put the facts out there. So that should scare any American or anybody really in the world.
Well, absolutely, and that for me is one of the places, and that's an example of where we find, you got secret societies, fraternal organizations, right, and people whose their allegiance is not necessarily to their community or their fellow citizen or even their country. It's to some, like with Skull and Bones, for example.
Sure. Very well said.
Yeah, well said. It's a big problem. So, but what I was going to say with respect to Hollywood here, or Hollywood Babylon, that long it's been discussed that there has existed it's a gay mafia, what is sometimes I think referred to as a velvet mafia. Now, right, yeah, we had a journalist from LA join us a couple of years ago, Mark Ebner. I know I've talked to you maybe off the record, just trying to maybe get the two of you in touch and see where you could take things.
We've been in touch. Yeah, we've communicated. Absolutely. We're friends on Facebook, or we're friends. I think he hit my list or hit his 5,000. But yeah, I know Ebner very well. I actually remember Ebner from one of his very early journalistic, even before he started writing books. He wrote about Scientology for a magazine called Spy, which shows how old I am, but Spy does not exist. But it was it was actually real investigative journalism, but also they were really snarky and sarcastic. And so Ebner's a long-time critic of a lot of these things. There's kind of a semi-famous or very memorable picture of Ebner holding the two Scientology e-meter cans up against his head. And you can find it online. It's really funny. So credit to Ebner. But yeah, he's a great, and he's a real investigative journalist.
He's done a lot of great work in that area. David Carradine, he went into extensive detail as far as his journey to, I guess it was, why am I thinking? Thailand? Yeah, exactly, Bangkok. And investigating where Carradine had actually died on that fateful evening, I guess as it was, and the various circumstances under which he found himself passing. But with respect to the gay or velvet mafia, it's interesting to note, did you know that he's actually attended pool parties with Bryan Singer at Singer's residence?
Ebner has?
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that. Was he in a state of undress?
Oh, geez, I don't know about that. But what he said, because when I raised this issue of young underage males, I think his kind of off-the-cuff remark was something like, it wasn't like people were, checking IDs at the door kind of thing. So he's also he helped out. He was really instrumental in putting together the South Park episode dealing with Scientology. So that was another
very famous too, right?
Yeah, that was great effort on his part. But this business of the gay mafia, he seemed to really be, my impression was quite dismissive. I could be wrong, but just looking at the context of things with his perhaps, relationship. I'm not sure in what form with Singer, but and others.
Right. Well, that's a good question. Is how many of these reporters have unstated communication or association with some of these characters? Who knows? I don't know. Who knows? The same thing with some of these other Hollywood reporters like AJ Benza. Some of his friends are people who were in the Me Too thing. So, how much honesty you're going to get for him. And he reports almost exclusively gossip from Hollywood. So,
you should check out his podcast, Fame's a Bitch, because I think have you listened to it?
He's a good storyteller. Really good storyteller.
He's great. Yeah, he's pretty damn
Well, he
good.
was on Opperman, so I asked him to be on Opperman when I was functioning as Ed Opperman's producer. So I was in contact with him, and I was also in contact with Ebner because he was recently on the Opperman report to talk about the story of Skip Chasen. Have you heard of Skip Chasen?
No. Does it relate to Hollyweird in some fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's a super Hollywood Babylon story, and it ties into the Smiley Faced Killers, too, because this Skip Chasen, if you look him up, his name is Skip, S-K-I-P, Chasen. He works for, I believe, or worked at a very relatively high-powered position as a negotiator for one of the ad agencies. But with Skip, I forgot what his bondage name was, but he had a bondage name. And Ebner was on the Opperman report talking about him because Skip Chasen killed a guy in his dungeon and kept his job, and everything just kind of went on normal. He just had an accident, the guy suffocated in a bunch of saran wrap. So, but yes, and Skip Chasen is huge in the bondage world. So, I mean, you can't even. There he is. You can't even find this guy on a Google search anymore. It's incredible. I can't even find Skip Chasen's name. They've just stripped him from the internet. Incredible.
That is quite something.
Gone.
Sure. Well, and noteworthy. So thank you for bringing that up. I had never heard.
Sorry, his name is Skip Chasey. That's probably why I couldn't find it.
Oh.
And here's the title: S&M loving Hollywood exec keeps job after man dies in his sex dungeon. And this is from, when was this drafted? June 29th, 2018. Skip Chasey, not Chasen.
Well, we're going to have to make a note of that and look into things further as you have done and probably will continue to do here over the following.
Here's let me give you the lead paragraph.
Yeah.
Quote, an exec at a top Hollywood agency, William Morris Endeavor, Skip Chasey, is still employed even though a man died in his basement dungeon after being mummified in plastic wrap and gaffer's tape, according to a new report by podcaster Mark Ebner.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's just going to let you finish there. I sometimes mute as well, too, just to let the guests have their say without too much background noise or interference. But
no problem. The deceased, Doran George, 47, a British-born UCLA professor with his doctorate and a dancer and avant-garde choreographer, was found in Chasey's well-equipped dungeon in Los Feliz.
Well, so no charges pressed? Nothing whatsoever?
No charges pressed, and his bondage name is Master Skip.
Well, here we go. That's why we talk about this from time to time on the show, the legal system versus justice, or some people like to call it the justice system, which is kind of was demeaning, I guess, really, or because justice is such a high ideal, of course, and you would expect that this man would be held to account. At least there'd be some investigation. Was it?
Well, what about the negligent homicide charge?
Yeah, sure. You know better.
Sure. I mean, you didn't mean to do it, but you were in somebody's care. You had a responsibility of care, a duty of care, and you failed in your duty of care. And you should go to jail or be punished in some means, right? Criminally. But that's the way it's going to work always in Hollywood. A lot of these guys, look at, have you ever heard the story of Ed Buck?
That was another name I was just going to bring up, along with another one I'll throw out there in just a second, but fly at it. Yeah, let's hear a little more about Ed Buck. He's been in the news.
I can post Ed Buck here. Let's see if I can post it.
How many black guys has he taken into his residence and had, methamphetamine fueled, sexual titillations, and how many have died?
At least too.
Jeez.
And there are underground reports that he was doing the same thing in North Carolina and killed people there as well.
Well, I guess he's a big Hillary Clinton supporter, so it's that then he should get a free pass. Is that how it works,
Just
or something?
A free pass, right? So if you donate $100,000 to a political party, does that mean that they're never going to prosecute you? Is that what you get in return? So you literally could be a serial killer. You could give money to a political party, and then the political party's lawyers, who are also got their job through political partisan, handouts, are never going to prosecute you. Is that the way it really works? Because if that's the way it works, we're all in deep trouble. I don't care which political party. I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, right? Because they're never going to prosecute their own.
That's right.
Have you seen the picture of Ed Buck with Schiff? Do you know who Adam Schiff is?
Yeah. He's got pretty shifty eyes, that Schiff, too, I
Shifty,
must say.
but yeah, he's one of Trump's biggest antagonists. And here he is hanging out with a guy who's had, people have just rolled out 2 dead bodies out of his apartment in West Hollywood.
Well, I guess if you got the bucks, that speaks volumes there. And as you say, it does a lot to help make potential charges just completely disappear. So before we continue on any further here, I'd just like to give a shout out to we have now around 10 people, believe it or not, join us here in the live YouTube Peanut Gallery chat. So that's great. We were a little worried. Well, not so much worried as concerned, shall we say. I as a pirate, I tend not to worry about too many things. On a day-to-day basis, we stare death in the face. So who me? Worry? But, we've had, because it's an early start here, 2 hours ahead of time, we thought we might not be able to bring or draw in our typical crew of listeners or
Hey, Jeffy,
fellow
I just
pirate crew members.
Jeffy, I just uploaded the picture of Buck with Schiff.
Oh, God.
And if you can put it in the chat, that would be great. Or put it in the YouTube.
Okay. Well,
Can you see that from Skype?
It's going to be kind of tricky here because of the way we're set up, but I'll do what I can. Maybe you could from your end if you got the link there.
I have the link, but I don't think I have control over the live. Let me see. If you
don't, just jump in there, make a comment, say hi or something, and we'll make you a mod, and that'll give you the green light to do whatever you want, pretty much. So, but let me just say, going back, circling, it's a bit of a callback here to AJ Benza. And that, and fame's a bitch. I've really managed to pick up a lot of great insights and bits of information and so forth via his show. He's not always right. Sometimes he, like with Roger Stone, for example, he was of the belief that Stone was going to turn on his old longtime friend Trump. Hasn't happened so far, and I don't really see it taking place anytime soon, given the fact especially the winds have shifted in a big way, is my impression. But
yeah, I get that feeling.
Yeah, but what he did, who's this young little transvestite or transgender, whatever he is? I don't know what the hell. I don't know. How am I expected to know how these things work if I'm not part of this community in an intimate way? Like, what the hell is it to me? Why do I have to take it upon myself to learn all the ins and outs, excuse the pun, of how these people operate? But that young little boy, they've been parading around on
the young boy stripper.
Yeah, do you know that his handler? Speaking of people that have got off scot-free and had murder charges disappear and so forth, he actually ended up serving time for a really gruesome, just sick murder. The way that it was done, executed, and just. It's just mind-blowing. But Benza went into it, and the guy's name escapes me. We could, I'm sure, be able to find that out here. Maybe somebody out there actually in the Peanut Gallery can track that one. Is his name Desmond? Desmond the Amazing or something they call him, isn't that right?
Yeah, that little boy stripper, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, sexualizing a 10-year-old boy, yeah.
Well, that's just the thing. And these little girls, like, was it Benet Ramsey, that whole culture, just it really makes me kind of quite sick, actually, because
I don't know if she was really Hollywood, but
what I'm getting at is
that story.
Yeah, that whole way the parents push. I think there's a lot of that goes with the whole child star kind of industry in Hollywood. that, and I shouldn't be so dismissive. Really, it's like America. Sometimes I spell it with a C. Sometimes I spell it with a K. Sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. But hey, that's the way I roll. So sometimes it's Holly Weird, and sometimes it's Hollywood, because I can give praise and support where I feel it's warranted, but sometimes things are definitely way off the rails. But yeah, that whole child star industry and the way they push the little kids, and just the overt and the sexualization, prepubescent sexualization, these little like child toy items is what they make them into. So that's a big deal. And
that's another thing about Hollywood is what's the real secret. Some people have speculated the Me Too movement is really a cover for all the pedophilia. So that all these young kids who've come into Hollywood have just been raped. They're all being raped.
Yes.
That whole Nickelodeon show, according to things that were in Crazy Days and Nights, is just a pedophilia everywhere. That all those girls were raped, and that even Britney Spears' sister, that baby that she had was from a producer that she didn't want to, that she gave birth to. It wasn't her boyfriend. That's what the story they're insinuating. So it's bad, terrible.
Corey Feldman actually came out, not that he's the most reliable source necessarily, but that was what he stated quite openly. Finally, somebody came out and said it, a prominent, someone who's well known, although his career is not really in peak form, of course. He has his own issues that have plagued him over the years, it seems. But he did state that that's one of the biggest secrets, unspoken secrets to Holly Weird, is the fact that it's, as you said exactly there, the child molestation and grooming and just the total
and passing
abuse
around these little kids.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about Singer. There was a kid's name, I can't remember his name. They end up burning out or dying at like 20. They're drugged out, they're lost, they're cast aside. But this one boy was like passed around. And the whole story of the little girl from Poltergeist who died from the poltergeist, I forgot what her name is, isn't that she died of some disease, it's that she was basically raped to death by a bunch of people. And, she basically died. And you can see some of the old, there is corroboration of the evidence that she was on steroids because she was constantly being assaulted in one of her last movies on the Poltergeist. Like, it was a really bad Poltergeist movie, but somebody's giving her steroids. Her face is super fat. It's just unbelievable. It's super disgusting.
Heather O'Rourke was her name.
O'Rourke,
yeah. She born in 1975. She was only 6 years younger than me, actually, just for the record. She died when she was like 13 years old. Now, here's what it says. Cardiac arrest caused by septic shock due to intestinal stenosis. Now, I know you know something about this, and we've talked about this in private in the past. I'm not sure if you'd like to go into it. I certainly think you would do a public service by sharing it with people, what your theory is.
Within the Crazy Days and Nights stories is that she was, just like you were talking about, passed around. It was pedophilia, and she was basically raped. Somebody, did some unspeakable stuff to her, and it ended up puncturing or perforating something in her internal organs, and she died. That's the real story, That's in the cover story. It was just a huge cover-up about, she just accidentally died. It was like some kind of John Benet Ramsey situation or something. Something went wrong during some pedophilia thing, and that's what Crazy Days and Nights are reporting, not me.
Yeah, this is according to, as you say, Crazy Days and Crazy Nights. And that, I think what they concluded, the theory, the assertion is that she was sodomized, basically, was one of the big issues, and that's what is believed to have led to the health issues. What is it again? Here, let's get this. Cardiac arrest caused by septic shock due to intestinal stenosis. That's I'm sure most doctors general practitioners even probably heard about that one. But now there is a high-profile movie director who's actually been implicated in her death as well. I'm not sure if you care to lay it out there for listeners who this is, but he's known all over the world, clearly, and just probably.
Well, I mean, they're saying Spielberg, right? Spielberg was the director; he's the producer.
Now,
something around there. I don't. According to his Crazy Days and Nights, it wasn't him.
Oh, how about that? So
they're saying somebody else. There were. I mean, it's. Yeah. I mean, it's like what happens there, and what these producers get away with, man. It's just incredible. People who are in executive positions, you know.
Right.
I mean, and they tell stories. It's not just. It's Heather Locklear. The same thing. A lot of these women are just being abused. They might as well be prostitutes, because people in power who give them their jobs are basically having, inappropriate conduct where there's the power dynamic is not. They don't even have any power. They don't have a choice. So a lot of these guys have been, Me Too. And the casting couch is an endemic to Hollywood and goes back 100 years from the beginning. So, if you want to be a success in Hollywood and you're young, man, if you're a woman too, you got to be really questioning your sanity, because the levels of abuse are just off the charts.
Yeah, it's a casting couch for kiddies, really, in this instance. And...
Well, in part, you're right, but it's not all of it. It's not. The kids are couched, the girls are couched, some of the men are casting couched. The stories are just everywhere, man. They're coming from all angles. So, it's just really crazy. But the Heather O'Rourke story is very disturbing. The kids, you hear stories about Corey Haim was raped by. They're reporting that Corey Haim was raped by the Kyle. What are the two brothers who killed their parents?
Oh, geez,
was it Kyle and
Ramirez?
No. It was a Hollywood murder, but they're reporting that the dad that they killed was a pedophile and was raping Corey Haim. That's what they reported, not me.
The brothers claimed this?
No, Crazy Days and Nights.
I see. Yeah, the brothers seemed a little bit. So
but the brothers were Kyle. What the guy? It was the Preppy Killers. Remember the Preppy brothers?
Yeah, I vaguely, that was not really something.
It was Lyle and
Menendez.
Yeah, Menendez. So they reported, Crazy Days and Nights reported that the Menendez dad was raping Corey Haim.
Isn't that something? So, and I guess it's a reliable source to some extent, at least, and is one that you've recommended in the past.
They're networked. Some of those people, there's speculation that one of the guys is posting on there is Robert Downey Jr. That's been directly feeding information to Crazy Days and Nights. Somebody who's been around.
Sure.
And the story about the Playboy that you referenced, Playboy's repository of all these tapes and pics of famous people doing the deed, is Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, a lot of people
argue that's pure speculation. I'm not saying that's him.
Right, sure. Yeah, this
rumor
has it that could be the case. And that's something that we have discussed. I think it was off the record. It was part of the premium content that we put together the last time we talked, as I recall. But this business of the underground, the Playboy tunnels, of which there are maps, blueprints, and everything. Just a few years before he died, Hef was asked about the whole matter, and you could see the whole way that the question was put to him, and his response. Presumably, he had a little bit of time to think about it, but it was presented as an April Fool's joke. So yeah, but what the rumor word has it, what people are saying is that from what I can gather, well, either the tunnels would be one thing, but that there is, whether they're in place or not, there is said to be this underground repository of people all throughout Hollywood over the years, blackmail material, really, of so many of them caught sexual acts of various sorts.
In flagrante delicto.
You remember running that one by me last time? I wasn't too sure, but it just means nude, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just means in a delicate, flagrantly delicate, I think.
Okay.
Is what the translation is. So, but it's in Latin. It's a nice way of saying, sexual content.
Well, delictio, presumably the word delicious. So we'll just leave that one there.
I'm looking it up right.
Right.
In the very act of wrongdoing, especially an act of sexual misconduct, in flagrante delicto.
Flagrante is
in blazing offense. In blazing offense.
That's right. Well, yeah, flagrant. Flagrante, sure, absolutely. I wanted to kind of maybe shift gears a little bit. Of course, we can circle back and return to any of these talking points with the approximate hour or so that we have left here. I want to shift the focus, so mostly just backing things up to Kenneth Anger. He seems to be a really pivotal figure in the underground Hollywood film scene and beyond. We were talking about him just in brief. The name came up before we kicked things off here this go around. Episode number 146 of Pirate Radio Podcast with me, myself, your host as always, the Robin Hood's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder, and our special return guest. I think this is now the fourth or fifth time he's taken the time out to join us, so we very much appreciate that, William. Thank you very much. William Ramsey from out of Los Angeles, California. But yeah, Kenneth Anger, where do you want to start with him exactly?
Well, it goes all the way back. His real name is Kenneth Anger Meyer, and he is from Los Angeles and was an early avant-garde filmmaker. And he traveled to France. He was friends with some of the French directors when he was very young. But he took an interest in Hollywood. He was there, but he was always interested in underground themes. He's a homosexual, and he made sexually charged things about bikers. I think one was called Killer Commando, like some biking movies when he was younger. He actually was, one of his films was banned, and the case about the banning went all the way to the California Supreme Court. So you can actually read that case file, and it was from the 40s. But he was friends with many people in the very early part of occult Hollywood, and one was Jack Parsons. And Jack Parsons was Aleister Crowley considered Jack Parsons in the Agape Lodge in Pasadena, California. His most important devotee, his most important follower, he considered was Jack Parsons, who made the oath of the Antichrist and was roommates with L. Ron Hubbard. He, at the time, was a science fiction writer, and this is the 30s and 40s. And so Kenneth Anger actually lived with Jack Parsons' wife. Her name was Marjorie Cameron. She's kind of a underground hero. She was Jack Parsons' Scarlet Woman, which is kind of like a magical designation for a female who's conjoined with the beast. Typically, these men consider themselves beasts. So Anger was friends with her, but he was also friends with none other than Alfred Kinsey, who was the so-called sexologist. He was a person of some repute. At that time, his research was considered credible. He wrote about men and male sexuality. I can't remember the title of his book, but both Anger and Kinsey traveled to the Abbey of Fatima, Crowley's Abbey of the Will in Cefalù in Sicily and Italy. And they traveled. There's pictures of them together. And while he was there, Anger, who considers himself a warlock and a follower of Aleister Crowley, really he went into the Chamber of Nightmares that had been plastered over all these pictures that Crowley had drawn in his fairly tolerable painting style of all these, demons and stuff like that. Anger was there, trying to refurbish or reveal them from underneath this plaster of Paris that had been painted over. So Anger was friends with him, but and then Kinsey dies. His research is analyzed, and he actually couldn't back up everything. And all of Kinsey's conclusions are basically the same as a Satanist's conclusions. All of his conclusions are pedophilia is normal, homosexuality is normal. You can do what you want. There's no limits. And that's kind of the way Kinsey actually lived his life. He had a very strange, the cause of his death, if you want to read about it in my book, Children of the Beast, will conclusively disabuse you from believing anything that came out of his mouth. But that's not where Anger's association stopped. So when he went into the 60s, he moved to San Francisco during the the Summer of Love, and he lived in this place in 67 with none other than Bobby Bouzoulet, who would go on to kill Gary Hinman and was part of the Manson family. And people just leave out the fact that anger is associated with the Manson family, but it's an incredibly important component because anger was going to include Beausoleil as Lucifer in his film Lucifer Rising, and he was arrested for the murder and put in jail. He wasn't be able to do it, but he actually ended up doing the soundtrack. Beausoleil is a talented musician. So anger is actually included Beausoleil in a film called Invocation of My Demon Brother, and you can see Beausoleil in there. And Beausoleil writes about all this strange stuff that happened when he lived with anger. Talked about all the books, magical workings, this other thing. And Beausoleil is actually, there's a famous picture of Beausoleil in front of what was called the Russian Embassy building, which is kind of in between Civic Center of San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury. He's standing in front of there with a top hat, the style of which was borrowed, if not ripped off, by Mick Jagger. And in the back of the door, it says, written in red paint is do it thou wilt. So you see this dictum of Aleister Crowley right there. And all that stuff is really left out of the discussion of the occult aspects, the intelligent occult aspects of Manson, anger, and Beausoleil are all left out of the narratives of the Manson family, which is a shame because that's really what it's all about. But it doesn't even stop there. So then anger, after all this stuff went down with Manson, he leaves and goes to London and hangs out with Jimmy Page. And he's hanging out with Mick Jagger and all these other people in these occult movements. And he and Jimmy Page were in competition for trying to buy all of the old Aleister Crowley artifacts. They wanted to include him, and Page had a lot more money. But they became friends. So the arc of Anger's life, and Anger was actually very interesting. He wrote a book called Hollywood Babylon, and it was a real revelation and exposure of all of these strange events that happened in Hollywood: murders, sexual escapades, early deaths, drug overdoses. Just this whole litany. It was actually delivered in a brown paper bag, like it was pornography. And it was actually considered pornography, I think, at one time. But it was very coveted as a book when it came out and was published. And the guy's arc was just incredible. So then he comes back to L.A., and even recently he was in some kind of occult video with James Franco. So you just see this arc that goes through from the very beginning, Kinsey, all the way to James Franco. It's just incredible. So Kenneth Anger's history. Oh, I was going to say that one of his patrons, he had a very rich patron who was none other than John Paul Getty Jr., who is this very rich, and his name is written all over Los Angeles. He was an oil magnate, Getty was, and his son was a known kind of bachelor, a wealthy bachelor, heroin addict, who used to sleep in coffins and stuff like that. But whenever Anger needed money or wanted to travel across international lines or take planes, according to Anger, J. Paul Getty Jr. would just pay his fare, just pay for a first-class flight to England and do all this stuff. So he really had benefactors, and Anger did, and possibly still does to this day. So he was recently, as far as just this year, he was at the Hotel Chateau Marmont, which is kind of a famous hotel here in L.A., just telling about his history. So he's still around. He's 92. We talked about that at the intro, but the real story of Kenneth Anger, which I include in detail in my book, Children of the Beast, is a very important modern occult story for people, particularly people who don't think that the occult influences cultural events. You'll be, hopefully, if you read it and understand it, you'll be disabused of that notion.
There's so many different directions we could take things here at the moment. What I'm going to do, though, is kind of put the brakes on things. And thank you very much for unpacking that whole business regarding Anger. He definitely is is the word seminal. Maybe that's not the best choice. I
think so.
But he's a really central figure. So just noticing as well, too, from right out of the blue, this doesn't happen too often. Not of late, it hasn't. But we're having some streaming issues here is what YouTube is telling us. Hopefully listeners on the other end are not experiencing too much in the way of compromised sound quality, but we'll continue to forge ahead here nonetheless. At least we're not getting kicked offline, at least not quite yet. But one of the secret societies in Hollywood, there's so many different clubs, so many different special, if you got the money, you can buy your way into different elite after hours locations with, who knows who in
Elite
attendance.
Clubs.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, you're right. Elite clubs, after hours parties, known mansions where all kinds of things, if you want anything, pleasure palaces, underground prostitution, human trafficking, a whole bit.
Bill Maher actually came out. There was a story. I'll do a quick search here during when you take things over here. But yeah, he was, last year it came out, he pays up to $100,000 a year, I guess, to hold his membership fees or dues to be part of this elite sex club, which I think is based out on the East Coast, if I'm not mistaken. Similar kind of deal as to what we see and hear about, courtesy of Hollywood, of course. So now that gets pretty eyes wide shut as far as things go.
Maher's been exposed by other people for being at the Hef Mansion, partaking in its offering, so to speak.
Oh,
so he's compromised. He's compromised, no question.
Well, it would be quite difficult, wouldn't it? Quite temptation. It's so many of us, we fall victim, become ensnared, I guess, is one way. I know you as you don't really exactly wear your religion on your sleeve as much as a lot of other people tend to, but you're a practicing Christian of sorts, and the devil ensnaring us in these various iniquities and so forth. The word sin itself too, of course, it just means to miss the mark. But I myself have noticed that when I historically, and these are mistakes too, let's not forget, people, that we all make, and hopefully over time we learn from our mistakes. But yeah, there's almost sometimes instant karma involved as far as looking back and just asking yourself, like, geez, what the hell did I do? Alcohol too, I tell you, once you add that to the equation, people's morals go right out the window, is generally what I've found.
Sure. Yeah, I think that sin just means error. Sinful is an error-filled life, but a lot of these people reject the notion of right and wrong, so they don't even believe that their actions have some kind of consequence before God. They just do what they want, So I think they even reject the notion of sinfulness.
Right, which, I mean, myself personally speaking, once again, definitely don't go that far. I am largely, open to the idea of doing what you want, but also people have got to realize there are consequences to their actions, and that before they proceed down a certain course of action, they need to think about that and reflect upon what the potential harm could be. And most people just don't have that sort of inward reflective wisdom, really, because we just want to grasp what looks on the surface to be really sweet or shiny, as if it's going to really somehow make us happier or comfortable or whatever the case may be. So I'm just going to turn the focus right now, though, to what we got going here in the chat area. Once again, up to about 10 people altogether, and we haven't given a shout out to the actual folks who've taken the time to vote with their computer mice and drop by, taking a little bit of time out of their day. And as you yourself here have done once again, William, tip of the pirate hat to you in the biggest kind of way, of course. Joe Eminon dropping in. We got both the Pirate Joes here this go round again, so that's great. Pirate Joe Eminon out of Long Island, New York. He, of course, recently bringing us the news that things are looking good in the John Ford case. John Ford, of course, the UFO political prisoner out there on the East Coast, someone who has been institutionalized for nearly the past quarter century and perhaps on the verge of gaining his freedom. So things definitely moving in the right direction there. People will want to maybe look into that a little further, or just send your prayers, or if you will, just you're not particularly religious type individual, let's say, just best wishes. How about that? That works for me, as well as prayers. Similar kind of deal as far as people's hearts being in the right place. John needs all the support he can get. We've also got Pirate Joe, or Pyatt Joe, as we like to call him, Joe Pyatt, the pirate, here, a fellow expat out of South Korea, dropping by, so that's great. People, once again, voting with their computer mice. Tommy Shutter out of the great sunshine state of Florida, USA. Now, Drew Lima, Sons and Daughters of Liberty. I believe that's Drew. It's interesting. I'm gonna bring this up, actually, because I think it's important within the context of things, and maybe that's one of the reasons he dropped by, William. But he's actually a practicing member. Hope he doesn't mind me laying this out there for people. I don't know if it was supposed to be a totally well-kept secret or not, but a member of the OTO. So,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I imagine there's a few practicing OTO members in Hollywood. What other fraternities, along with Freemasonry and the like, are you aware of? And what more can you say about the OTO in particular?
Well, I mean, I think you sent me the link to the early Hellfire Club. Like, had the Barrymore family was in it, all these guys. There's clearly other groups that are in Hollywood, groups that were associated with the death of the Black Dahlia. There is an OTO body in Los Angeles. It's reminiscent of the Agape Lodge, which was really very close to Hollywood, right off of Hollywood Boulevard. So, I think that these groups are probably still there today. You don't know the totality, you don't know their names, but they still exist. They're around. I mean, not just in Hollywood too, but all over the country. You mentioned Skull and Bones. So, yeah, they're still around.
Quite active in a big way, it would seem. In fact, some people have even talked about how, in order to gain a role or a foothold in the movie industry, you pretty much are expected to sell your soul and be compromised in some fashion, either via the casting couch or by pledging support and becoming a member in one of these fraternal orders, right up to the point of the so-called Illuminati. So I don't know what the tie-in there is exactly, but there's a lot of talk about that whole business. Do you any thoughts, or have you written about this in any of your books?
No, but I definitely believe that there's a glass ceiling in Hollywood. It's not a glass ceiling based upon ethnicity or male being a male gender. I actually think there's an occult glass ceiling, and if you're an occultist, they bring you in, they'll help you out, and if you're not, it's like the Velvet Mafia. If you're not, you're just never going to have an in with those group of people. So I definitely think that so many of these movies in occult Hollywood and everything that I did was they are they're just laden with occult symbolism. Many of these filmmakers, people that are well-known names, Oliver Stone, Roman Polanski, Kubrick. These guys put in incredible references to secret knowledge that are right in front of your face. So it's definitely there. There's no question. And these guys all at the top are dealing with it or have dealt with it or have seen it. So they're making arrangements to be successful within that that milieu and in that environment.
It's interesting you mentioned Kubrick. I think you probably have some insight into the matter, or you've heard some theories floated as to what was actually behind his all too untimely passing. Of course, it just was a little too coincidental for some people, how he passed away just right out of the blue there as they were wrapping up the Eyes Wide Shut project. And that, in addition to the fact that there was said to be some rather controversial footage that he wanted in the film, that the studio executives did not, and so on and so forth. Any just further insights as to what happened when he left this world?
Well, the final cut, the cut that he wanted, the public has never seen. So the true director's cut, which is what he wanted, was never seen, and the people at Warner who financed it didn't like that original cut, is my understanding. So he was very fortunate for the executives that he died so that they could actually refit this movie that they had taken years to film with, at that time, real A-list stars, right? Tom Cruise and what was the other girl's name? So
Nicole Kidman.
Nicole Kidman, right? So I think that it's a shame because we really don't know the real layout. Even what was left of that film was very revelatory, and a lot of very creepy films came out in 1999. So it was a very interesting year for films. You go back and look at the important films that came out in 1999.
You know what I'm thinking? Excuse me for jumping in, but was that, I bet you, The Ninth Gate, Johnny Depp? You remember that one? As well as...
That was 1999.
From Hell? How about that? I don't know. Maybe that was
interesting. But those are all, and I covered the writer of From Hell. His name is Alan Moore. All based upon Masonic murders, that the Jack the Ripper murders were actually Masonic, done by somebody associated with the royalty in England, and they wanted to cover up an original murder. I mean, actually an original pregnancy by one of the royal family of a commoner. So they killed, 6 people ritually at certain times and dates and certain locations to cover up. And then they sent this apostate member of the royal family to Scotland to live out the rest of his life after they killed these hapless women. But yeah, From Hell. But yeah, these occult movies, they're there. If you really try to take apart Johnny Depp's and Polanski's movie, The Ninth Gate, it's incredible, man. It's like the opposite of like a Pilgrim's Progress. It's a Pilgrim's Progress for Satanists. It's off the charts.
Yeah, I'll have
to. It's an incredible film, full of occult symbolism. Even though the whole story is about occultism, it's about the triumph, really, of the main character to enter into the Ninth Gate, beating out all of his antagonists. So it's pretty remarkable. His antagonists end up dead.
I'd have to go back and revisit that movie, The Ninth Gate, and look at it a little more closely, study the symbology. But are you saying that did Johnny Depp he died in the end? Did he, or
no? He entered in the Ninth Gate.
Oh, okay. Now, you know who actually, as I recall, was it not somebody who had in the past played Dracula? If I'm not mistaken, he's a really well-known character actor. I don't know if you've seen this is a Dracula that came out maybe in the early.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Peter Longoria. The name's not. It's just not coming, but. I see his face. It's one of the problems I can see every time somebody comes up. I can see their face and don't necessarily remember their names. But yeah, that was a great movie as far as the esoteric, symbolic in your face type approach that they took.
Well, I'll let you into a little secret. At the very end, Johnny Depp has sexual relationships with this kind of demonic entity that was following him around, and he is actually partaking in a Crowley ritual, which is the marriage of the beast and the Scarlet Woman. So, the woman who rides the beast, she's riding him, and the beast is Depp.
Poor old Jack Sparrow, not doing too well these days. His finances in tatters, and this is really quite sad and ironic, tragic, of course, one could clearly say in the classic Shakespearean sense of the word. He himself, a longtime practitioner, supposedly, of what's known in some circles as chaos magic. Isn't that along the lines of what Alan Moore practices? What more can you tell us about chaos magic?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. And actually, you can say, you brought up Jack Sparrow. Jack Sparrow is supposedly an exemplar of a chaos magician. If you watch his actions and what he does, he's like a magician. That character, based upon Keith Richards, says all these strange things and off-color things. So chaos magic is really kind of the post-Crowley black magic system. Came out with... what's the book's name? I think there's a book actually called Chaos Magic. I can't remember the practitioner, but yeah, I mean, it's Alan Moore is one of these practitioners, all these other guys. So it's just another occult order, I would say, as far as I know.
Joey Boomer here saying lots of new TV shows with these strange occult people of the past, just showing glimpses, but sometimes coded language. Fun show, guys. What else do we got here? The Hollywood Dark.
Well, you have this show called Strange Angel, which is about Jack Parsons, somebody who I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And I think it's on its third season now, produced by Ridley Scott.
That's right. Yeah. So I actually downloaded an episode or two via Popcorn Time, which I encourage anyone to, if they can get their hands on it, work with that app. It's all, basically you're able to access free movies and TV shows and whatnot. So, I once talked to a lawyer, actually, speaking of what some refer to as pirating, and now you yourself being a lawyer as well too, so this might be more in your wheelhouse, as the expression goes. But he's back in Canada and talking about how, from what he could gather, that as long as there was no money trading hands, that as far as one need be concerned, these are just friends who are sharing files amongst one another. So I know it's a bit of a kind of a non sequitur, or a little bit off topic and off point in some respects, but just in brief, as far as the file sharing and, once again, what some might refer to as pirating of various items, do you concur with his thoughts, or do you see things maybe a little bit differently?
Concur with his thoughts about what? Can you restate that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, a little maybe too convoluted and rambling without basically. And let's see if I can keep this as brief and succinct as possible. That my lawyer friend in Canada, what he said was that so long as there's no money trading hands, nobody's profiting from the transaction, that he saw no reason why there should be a crime at play whatsoever. No harm.
Crime in regard to what?
Because nobody's making money. That was the point, right? It's just people sharing files. We have friends on the other side of the world who are sharing files with us, and we're happy to work with them, and it's open software, open source, and free software and files, and you name it. So I'm not sure. Feel free though, if you see things differently, let's have at it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, as long as there's no copyright, if it's an open source product, I don't see what the problem is.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, no, I guess there might be a copyright, but who's to really say? It's just, the point is, going back to Popcorn Time, which is an app that provides a lot of movies and TV shows and the like for download, that they're in business, and I'm working with them here off of Linux from time to time. Although I got most of my fill, I guess, back in the day with the various, when torrents were a little easier to work with and access here in Korea. Now things have, it's pretty much you have to go via the way of the VPN. So I just, it's too much of a hassle and headache that I don't even bother. I just got more important things to do. But yeah, it's just something I recommend to anyone out there that, if you're interested in, and you don't have it within your means to go out and spend a bunch of money on movies and TV shows necessarily, that's one way of doing it. So that is a bit of a non sequitur of sorts, though. And one of the things I like to circle back to, however, is this business of AJ Benz's Mysteries and Scandals. That was a great series that came out in the mid 90s, I guess is what it was. Did you ever get a chance to see any of what they produced?
I watched some of them, but I wouldn't call myself a regular listener. What did you think about it?
Oh, I'm just, because, you can access a lot of the content that's still up there and available on YouTube. So that's the only,
Gotcha.
Just,
so the whole show is now available on YouTube?
Yeah, just type in AJ Benza mystery scandals, and it's all the famous Hollywood, the various, the murders and, scandals once again that people basically found themselves mixed up in, and sometimes going down for, as it were, heading off to jail or just dying, or they're having their careers being destroyed. Fatty Arbuckle is one of the classics, of course.
Was in that was in Hollywood Babylon as well.
Sure. Jane Mansfield. We've got her, actually. We've a few of her pictures in the slideshow. I'm not sure if you're able to see this via...
I am.
Yeah.
I'm watching this.
Well, and is there anything in the slideshow that has kind of piqued your interest or that has jumped out at you as far as you feel, is worth addressing?
No, but tell me, did Benza's... Do you know if Benza's show overlapped with the information in Anger's book, Mystery Hollywood Babylon? I wonder if they overlapped.
I'm sure he's probably read both. We've actually got them here in the ship's library, believe it or not. The first one was not that expensive, but the second one, which really turned out to not be that much of a big deal, really. It was just more like a tabloid type read of, all the sordid, sort of lurid, the scandals and things that once again people found themselves getting caught up in. It was quite expensive. You can get it via PDF format online though as well too. So that's one way of going about it without having to fork out a whole lot of money. But sure, AJ, who you actually helped to get, I guess playing the role of co-producer essentially, helped to get him to drop by at Opperman's show. We've thought about reaching out to him, but we'll see if when we feel the time is right, we might do that. So I'm not sure your thoughts on Benza. I know we talked about just briefly in the sound and audio tech chat.
I mean, the guy has an interesting life. He's been around. He's been covering gossip or whatever, celebrities for decades. So he knows a lot. He's very aware of a lot of things that go on. People. He was good friends with Weinstein. So he's a good storyteller. I think that the shows that I've listened to of his are, well referenced. I kind of have a similar take about a lot of the hoax nonsense and, complicity of the mass media in just perpetrating deception. So he kind of has that same position. So I appreciate him for that. But, he knows a lot. He knows a lot of secret information. I'm sure that he doesn't tell all the stories, He knows a lot of stuff.
Sure. You know that Trump apparently stole his girlfriend back in the day. They, him and the Donald have had a, somewhat long-standing relationship and attended the same parties and, shared the same girlfriends over the years and so forth.
They had a squabble. Apparently, they buried the hatchet, according to Benza. Man.
Via the Howard Stern show, I guess. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, Benza has temper problems, so he's always fighting. He seems to be always be. He was fighting with somebody on the Howard Stern show, and I think he's in anger management classes right now.
He is. Actually. He is. He's a hot-headed Italian, and he actually rubbed shoulders with John Gotti back in the day, and he was out there with his coverage, the beat that he was assigned to, that a lot of he would, as you pointed out, the gossip columnist covering the club activities where the hot spots in town were and that sort of thing, that he would sometimes, I think is what he said, the mob guys would actually give him a little money, a kickback of sorts, if he wrote something favorable in one of the big New York newspaper publications that he was working for at the time. So
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Definitely.
I had heard that Gotti threw his weight around for Benza's benefit, is what I heard. I didn't know if that's true.
Well, he told a story once of him walking during Gotti's trial that. Well, there's a time back in the day, too, where they actually had dinner. He ended up at the dinner table with them for whatever reason. This is during his stint as a gossip columnist. And the mob guys, Gotti's underlings, didn't really want him around. But but Teflon Don, I guess. Yeah, the Teflon Don. We're not talking about Trump here either, folks. That he said he's fine. He's one of us, or he's with us, kind of deal. And they sat down and broke bread. Same kind of deal later during Gotti's court proceedings, when he was. I think that was a time where he didn't get off. He was taken down eventually there on multiple
eventually
charges.
They got him,
But he got in the elevator there, and it was pretty intimidating place to be, with just him and Gotti and his guys there in the elevator. So you could cut the air with the tension with a knife, I guess. But he got a pass there, courtesy of Gotti once again.
It wasn't a joke. Didn't Gotti kill the overboss of the Gambino family and took control, right? Didn't they kill, I forgot what the guy's name was.
Yeah. Well, they're constantly Frank Castellano.
Castellano,
that's
right.
Oh, that's how you do it, man. It's like you go and rub out these guys, and you're the big dog now, I guess. So, that's and typically as well. It is interesting to note that the mobsters, of which I think Hollywood has got its fair share of organized crime in various levels.
There's some of those. Yeah, it's run by like a mob in some aspects. There's an over, corporatized element, but in certain parts, you get in trouble, man. You can get guys who will fix things.
You'll never work in this town again.
Possibly, yeah, absolutely.
or worse, but
worse.
Yeah. So there's definitely that aspect of things, and something to.
They just let one of that guys out of jail. His name wasn't Castellano. He had a long Italian last name, but I think Benza was talking about him. And the guy had done. I mean, he finally got busted. He had a hand grenade in his safe and all kinds of money lying around. He was tapping people's phones like crazy, but they just he served like a 9-year sentence or something like that. And I think Benza was talking about it when he got out of jail. People went and saw him with little brown envelopes and handed him cash, get him back on his feet.
Showing their respects, or paying their respect, yeah.
Well, so you don't know the favors that are done, you don't know.
Right.
But somebody said, my kid got a DUI. My kid has a problem with this other girl or boy. There's pictures. There's this guy he's causing me trouble and threatening me, and people get called, It's not a problem for the police, but there's guys out there who, show up. Hey, how are you? How you doing? Yeah, there's a problem. I heard there's a problem. I want that problem solved. What do I have to do to solve the problem? How much money do I have to give you? If you don't take the money, then it's like plomo or plata, right? You take the silver or lead.
Ratchet up the pressure, definitely.
Yeah, those things happen all the time.
A lot of these characters too. They do wield their power from behind bars, even still. So
no doubt.
Something
Gotti did for sure.
Right. So okay, well, we could come back to that at some future point here. We've only got maybe another 15-20 minutes tops, and one of the things I'd like to talk about, though, just talking, this business of organized crime and so forth in Hollywood itself, the Jewish mafia. I was told years ago by a Jewish friend that they were the ones to look out for. I had no idea. I was pretty naive back then, and probably in a lot of ways still am. But he said, I asked him, "What do you mean the Jewish mafia?" He's like, "Yeah, man, they're the baddest, baddest of them all, basically. So they're the ones who you really got to watch out for." He said with a kind of wry smile, on his face there. So, yes, indeed. But and that's one thing with Hollywood is that why is there not? What about affirmative action for non-Jewish actors, the Goy Gentile? I don't understand that. Why? I guess it's all part of, let's just kind of keep it in the family here sort of deal. And
yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Hollywood was started by Jews,
sure,
who left the East Coast to make films where they didn't have to pay Edison.
That's right.
For the use of the film projectors. And that's really why they came to LA. They were sun all the time, and they got away from the taxation. And that's where it really started. They weren't all Jews, though, but it's still probably his population as a percentage is overrepresented by Jews, and by the executive is probably an overrepresentation by, a factor of 5 over than not all the executives or not all the talented people are Jewish for sure, but I think the presence is there, and you got a different sensibility, It's a different view of the world. So.
Freemasons too. They were Jewish
Freemasons. Yeah.
Well,
Jewish Freemasons, non-Jewish, Bob Hope, all these early guys in the 40s and 50s. A lot of those guys were Freemasons, not Jews. So when I look out and watch movies, I don't see that many people who are actors who are Jewish, who are like stars. If you look at all the stars, I don't think that there's an overt, at least in my analysis, an overt proportion of Jewish actors. However, the executives, it's a different matter.
Are you talking about historically?
Now, present day, contemporary.
Oh, I would beg to differ.
Really?
Oh, big time, sure. And don't forget, back in the day, they had to conceal their identities. Actors like Tony Curtis was
right.
a good example, and there was Kirk Douglas. I mean, they've all got these Eastern Europeans.
That guy, the pseudo, yeah. I mean, Kirk Douglas is a mutt. I don't even think he's not a practicing Jew.
Well, they brag about it a lot, it seems. So they like to make a big deal of it.
I'm looking it up. Kirk Douglas. Isur Danielovich.
Oh, boy. There we go. Yeah, exactly. So, and Tony Curtis. And who was that Humphrey Bogart's girlfriend? She just passed away a couple years ago. Lauren Bacall. There's another one. I was just watching the movie the other day, actually. What the hell was it? Now the title escapes me. But basically, Hollywood. What is it? Hollywoodism. There we go. That's what they called it. It's an empire, Jews, an empire unto their own kind of deal. So just outlining the whole history and how things came about. Exactly what you said. Essentially fleeing Thomas Edison's the taxation or the levying of the fees that he was out to burden them with, essentially. And I think I would have done the same thing myself if I was them. Of course, who wouldn't? So can't really blame them for that. But there's no doubt in my mind that through over the years they have definitely kept it in the family, as it were, without really going too far outside the as far as talent goes. It's just really unfortunate. At the same time, I'm thinking, what is it? Maybe these Goy Gentiles, they can't act. Not as funny, of course, as a lot of stand-up comedians are Jewish, and they're, in my mind, they're funny as all hell. Although people such as Sarah Silverman, I just don't get her at all, and I don't really have much respect for her. She's just nasty. Nasty too much. Just crossing the line, just taking it a step too far. Speaking of which, we got Mark Zuckerberg popping up here in the slideshow. That's one of the pictures that jumped out at me.
That's my picture.
There you go.
Picture I took.
Did you talk to him?
Briefly.
He was busy eating,
of
course.
He's a carpetbagger. He moved to my hometown, so.
Was he raised in the East Coast? Is that right?
Yeah, I think he's somewhere on the East Coast.
He's like Harvard educated or something, I think.
Harvard educated, that's right.
Yeah.
That's where Facebook started. It wasn't Facebook, it was some other name.
Well, it was Life.
Facebook.
I'm not sure if you've looked into this or not, heard about it. Here's a little bit, we'll present a little information to you maybe you haven't come across yet, but LifeLog is what you would want to look into. And that it was conceived of by DARPA, the Pentagon, and the CIA, from what I can gather. Just type into, we do DuckDuckGo searches here via Pirate Radio Podcasts and the wider WPRPN.com network. No Google here, unlike Alex Jones, of course. So to each their own. But yeah, DARPA, LifeLog to begin with, and then DARPA, Pentagon, CIA. That'll come up with a few decent stories in the search results, and you can just work with that. But here's the thing, is they had this project on the go that when Facebook, from right out of the blue, I guess they issued their first public stock, or how that works with companies basically coming to fruition, that suddenly the next day or the day before, that LifeLog just totally poof, it disappeared and was gone. So,
interesting.
Oh yeah, and there's no doubt with Facebook itself, it's been widely talked about how the secondary round of funding came via the CIA. So that's one of these.
Was it In-Q-Tel or whatever it is?
One more time.
In-Q-Tel is the CIA's investment arm that's in Silicon Valley.
How about
so they provide the angel financing, early financing for businesses that they're interested in. So,
with the time we've got left here, I want to talk a little bit about yachting, but also social media, now that you brought it up, because I've seen you've become a little more active on Minds, which is great. People definitely want to keep that in mind. So drop by his page over on minds.com, simply at William Ramsey, and take it from there. Upvote his content and remind it. And of course, you will be rewarded for that. Both parties concerned, I believe, is how it works, of course.
Get off the Facebook plantation.
It's it's awful. It's just so bad.
I hate being on Facebook.
Yeah,
I got 5,000 followers. I can't, 5,000 friends.
Well,
1,000 followers. I don't want to give that up, but I hate every time I go on there.
You don't have to. See, that's the thing. People think, oh no, I don't want to stop Facebook. Well, you can still keep Facebook and have Minds. That's not a problem. But see, here's the thing. Minds is a threat. It has become a threat to Facebook. I can tell you this with some degree of confidence. Why? Because Zuckerberg they've hashtag fakebook blocked all minds.com content, where now
they've blocked links too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to jump through all sorts of hoops and barrels and hurdles, safety checks and so forth, stating that, are you really sure this looks like a suspicious link, and doesn't quite meet our safety standards. So just total gobbledygook nonsense. And that's great. It just goes to show that because of the pro-free speech, really easy on the censorship, I think there's a little bit that takes place on Minds. They've actually got now a jury system in place, believe it or not, and I just got my first jury duty the other day. It just pops up out of the blue, and you've got 1 minute to click either yes or no sort of deal, and then you have a piece of content submitted to you. Take things from there as to whether you feel it should stand or the appeal should be struck down and the content not appear in the form that it is at that time being presented. So yeah, a lot of great things to be said about minds.com. It's good to see that you're finally over there and getting more hands-on active. Once again, encourage everybody to drop by William's channel, and you can keep Facebook. It's just a question of managing these various outlets and being aware that they will block you in every way possible if you try to share any links via Minds, unfortunately. But one of the things I was going to ask you about, because I know our time is limited, carpetbagging, because you didn't really lay that out. I know what it means, basically, but just if you could lay that out.
Carpetbagging, it's an old post-Civil War term that comes from people who came down from the north as traders, and they would take these, basically like a wagon down and sell things at inflated prices. It was called carpetbagging, and it just means somebody who comes to a place to sell stuff. So for me, that's what Zuckerberg was. He's an outsider who came to kind of where I used to live. So I don't. He's a contemptible person. I used to run go-karts on the street that he lives on now. He's just he's an awful human being, basically. That's all you can say.
He's got vampire teeth, too. I noticed the incisors.
He doesn't blink.
Yeah.
He looks like an android. He's very strange. He clearly, in my opinion, stole the idea from the Winklevoss brothers and was much more successful in his designs. But I don't even think it was his idea.
What was the name? Which brothers?
The Winklevoss brothers. They had big litigation. There was a bunch of litigation between they actually got paid out hundreds of millions of dollars. But they were the people who started. They had the Winklevoss brothers. Their idea for the Facebook system was something among the snobs at Harvard and the Ivy League where they could exchange information among themselves. And I think it really was Zuckerberg's idea that he could make it something for everybody. And that really wasn't, in my understanding, wasn't the Winklevoss's position. So they're known as the Winklevoss brothers. Right.
Sure. And now we've got, of course, Minds.com, which is open sourced, a lot different than what Facebook is, where the code is proprietary. In this instance, with Minds, you can see the code, get on GitHub if that's your, if you have technical ability, of course. It's public, and the algorithms are clear and can clearly be seen by anyone who has the ability to and technical know-how to look at them and assess where things stand. Whereas on Facebook, private and proprietarily owned, and that's what one of the big issues is these days. Something I guess it would be worth talking to you about just in brief here as we wind things down. With social media and the onslaught, the demonetization, which if you've been following things at all, you'll probably have noticed it's getting pretty bad now. And who knows if there's any connection to what
real bad.
Recently, we saw take place. The Bilderberg meeting just wrapped up. And I think that was one of the issues that was on the table with big tech, the Silicon Valley movers and shakers, to which they receive billions of dollars in public money, taxpayer money, being just given to them every year, from what I understand. So isn't that reason enough?
One of the subjects at the Bilderberg meeting was the weaponization of social media. They want to weaponize it, just like they've weaponized regular standard corporate media. So that's what it elicited in my mind when that subject was one of their headers. I was like, they probably already are trying to weaponize everything else. So you have these elitists. And it's a shame, too, that Pompeo and Kushner are going there, because they were put in power through Trump's populism, and now they're just being absorbed into, you don't know how much they're taking in or whether they're going to implement the stuff on Bilderberg, but you can see them being absorbed in an already existing elite system. So it's shameful. It's too bad.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see how things go. But at the same time, this is one of the reasons why we have live streams like this in place, because word has it, we're a bit of a threat, actually. Because we do have the numbers, and there's a lot of us out here, little independent, underground, online live streamers, podcasters, bloggers, and the like. And because of the money that's been thrown at the heavily CIA and Mockingbird media infiltrated corporate news outlets, that they're not too happy about the way that people are turning off their TV sets and shifting more of their focus to channels like ours, basically, right across the board.
Should.
Well, if people voting with your computer mice, I guess, is what it kind of boils down to. But let me just jump in here for a second and turn the focus back to the Peanut Gallery chat area once again as we work on winding things down here. Less than 10 minutes now left to go.
Less than 10 minutes. We're at an hour and a half, bro.
Pretty close. Well, an hour 27 is what it says here. Right? Okay. So we've almost got it. Yachting, though, I'll just leave that there with you to mull over for the next few moments as I rattle on down the what we see here in the Peanut Gallery and lay this out here for listeners. But yeah, Joey Boomer once again jumping in with a great comment talking about how Owen Benjamin discusses his Hollywood experience quite a lot. The more you submit to their BS, the deeper you will get. TRF2 in the house. He's been dropping by here from time to time over the last few weeks and months. So that's wonderful that you've decided to...
I got to run. I got to go, man. Thank you for the show. I got to run.
Okay, well, there goes...
I only have an hour and a half.
Oh, there goes William Ramsey. I guess his ride has come.
Yeah, my ride is here.
All right. Okay, well, happy sailing, William. We'll have to, do it another time. Pick up where we left off. Okay. There we go. Well, we're going to continue forging on here. This sort of happened last time as well, too, if I'm not mistaken, although it might have had more to do with the after show. But We did pretty much get the better part of an hour and a half with William. One of the other issues I was hoping to get into was this whole business of yachting. So that is something that he drew to my attention just the last time we spoke, I guess, was off the record, behind the scenes, part of the Rogues Gallery after show. And basically, for people who aren't in the know, it has to do with young, largely attractive women being invited onto wealthy people's yachts, and basically, typically just anyone who is interested in having a little fun with them, shall we say, is able to do that if they're able to pony up or cough up the right amount of money. So that's something that I had not heard of until he brought it up last time we spoke. This whole business of yachting, a kind of quasi prostitution type industry, really not too many people know about. One of the things I was going to say here, though, is that thank you, Sons and Daughters of Liberty, Drew Lima, discussing how his opinion or just view on this whole business, how kind of his thing, which brings us back to, he's talking about Crowley here, I guess, back to Parson and Hubbard, was Enochian, which is what they were doing out in California. Parsons never met Crowley, only brief correspondence by letters. That is correct. That is my understanding as well, too. So Joey Boomer thanking Drew for his comments, saying he's caught a lot of these online TV shows. Now, I'm just trying to actually recall what exactly the TV series is. William brought it up during the first part of the conversation. And anyways, if there's someone out there, maybe one of the listeners can type it in the chat area. The one that has been produced by Ridley Scott, whose brother, let's not forget, was said to have committed suicide, jumped off a rather large bridge a number of years ago. I believe that's the story, how things played out there in that instance, unfortunately. We'll be getting more into that this week as well, too. Speaking of suicides, with the news as it is, a whole number of apparent suicides of kind of somewhat prominent personages taking place over the past week or two especially. It's an ongoing thing as well, too, let's not forget. And keep in mind, just because we're expected to believe it was a suicide doesn't mean it necessarily was. Just look at former president of South Korea, No Moo-hyun, who the media all in lockstep fashion, what was it that Orwell said? Repetition equals truth. So just endlessly repeating and telling us that the president or whoever the person happens to be, that it was suicide, no questions asked. That if they say it enough, that we're bound to believe it. Unfortunately, though, or I should say fortunately maybe, if people are to take a closer look and ask a few more critical questions that media does not, because really they are a compromised interest and industry. They know who signs their paychecks and how far they can go as far as issuing the truth and really letting the public know what's going on. That taking a look at that case in particular, a lot of really fishy things taking place. The apparent suicide of former South Korean President No Moo-hyun. You can find information regarding the whole affair online. It's if you know where to go and what you might be looking for. They don't make it all that easy, but there has been some behind-the-scenes discussion. So even a lot of Koreans, interestingly, they do not necessarily subscribe to the official narrative on that one. They too can tell that there's some funny business that took place with respect to the only witness on site being his bodyguard at the time, along with the fact that this bodyguard apparently changed his story as to the details of what occurred. He flip-flopped several times regarding the whole matter. So as if that's not enough to, when it comes to investigating these sort of crimes, lead one to suspect that there might be something more to things than what we're being told. On top of that, the fake suicide note, which was typed out on his computer, supposedly. No signature or anything, I don't believe. It was typed. And then the timestamp as well with that whole thing. Things not just adding up or making any sense. And there's more to it than that as well, too. So don't really want to get into things in much detail on that front, but want to turn the focus here back to the conversation area. What we see, just in wrapping things up, without William, unfortunately, as he had to make his way on out the door. He's running on a tight schedule. I believe some possible family obligations and the like. So that's one of the reasons we had to kick things off a couple hours early this go around. Let's see what we got here. Joey Boomer talking about asking rather, I guess it's a question, isn't magic bad karma? It's magic spelled with a K. Sometimes Crowley, I guess he would spell it with a C. You know, a poetic license is what how I would look upon that. And so even myself, I choose sometimes to spell the word America, sometimes with a C, sometimes with a K. Canada, same kind of deal. The ideal Canada is with a C. The one that's all screwed up and being routinely subverted, undermined, and systematically destroyed, order out of chaos, endlessly being produced, that's with the K. Same kind of deal when it comes to spelling America. But either way, Crowley was an idiot, says Sons and Daughters of Liberty. What's karma? It's all cause and effect. That is correct. It's the illusion meant to keep people blind to truth. Well, I'm not sure about that. I have to go into more detail. But there's no doubt that within Hindu, Eastern philosophy, the term Maya, something that simply means the veil of illusion. That's what we all have to work with here. A matrix type predicament scenario. All of us being mere nodes in the matrix. Here we are in time and space. Born at a particular time to set of particular parents under a particular set of conditions, whether male or female, tall or short, intelligent or not, handsome, attractive, pretty or not, a whole range of varying attributes and abilities and so forth. Why is it that each of us is here, born at a particular time, particular place, in a particular fashion? That is, I suppose, one of the great mysteries to life. However, if you do look at things as operating within the context of a universal cosmic matrix, each of us, once again, being our own unique, particular subjective node, that helps to explain things and goes a long way in unpacking, I suppose, or penetrating, providing us with some insight into these matters. Your thoughts are magic in a sense, says Joey Boomer, right about karma. So is it all your intent? I'm not sure what he means. Intent, yes. Well, the road, what is that famous expression? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That sort of deal. Not that all things that are done with good intent end up completely train wrecked or in a worse state than if you had pursued things differently. But it's one of those famous old expressions and idioms, of course. Bingo, says Drew Lima. It's all about intent. No such thing as black, white, or whatever label you want to use. It's all about intent. Everybody's interpretation of intent is different. That's correct. Do what they will. Intent. That is what is truly meant. But keep the illusion and let people believe what they want so they never use their true will, intent. I guess that's what Crowley referred to as thelema, if I'm not mistaken. And he was somebody who did study Buddhism as well, too. It's interesting to take note of that. Bit of a history there. One of his oldest friends who was a member of early magical organization that he was a part of, Charles Henry, is it Allen Bennett was his name, that in later days, although they were quite close during their time in the, I guess, was it Golden Dawn? One or something or another, one of the magical organizations that he was a part of, that they were quite close at that period in their lives around the turn of the century, that in his later years, Bennett, who died sometime before Crowley kicked the bucket, that he would not have anything to do with the great beast. When he sought to reestablish contact with him, that things had, for whatever reason, got to the point where Bennett had no particular interest in having anything more to do with Aleister. So we'll leave that to people's intellects, perhaps, to work out as to why that was the case. Let's see what we got here. We're almost at the bottom. Yeah, this business of carpetbagging I thought was kind of critical because, well, the Bush family, the Bush-Clinton crime syndicate, although the Clintons, as George Carlin called him, Bill Clinton, was a former governor of Arkansas, of course. There's, speaking of which, a rather high-profile murder, death. Somebody, well, it was a former Arkansas senator who was said to have died from a gunshot wound to the head. Whether that was a suicide or not, I guess we'll get a little more into this coming Tuesday night. I think there was another apparent suicide, and I say that, apparent in brackets, air quotes, of course, suicide as well, too. Because so many times these matters they do what they can, working with the playbook they have, as what Robert Morningstar just a few weeks ago so clearly made evident, that working with the playbook, they do what they can, that these fixers, maybe plumbers of sorts, or whatever, mechanics, however you want to call them, a little bit of wet work there, having some fun with getting rid of people, that it's things are not always what they appear to be or what we're expected to believe, what we're told they are. So lest we be deceived. Another politician, though, as I recall, just in going over the news in brief, a couple days ago from Oklahoma, similar kind of deal. So high-ranking New York police chief and a detective as well, now having disappeared. The police chief, supposedly suicide once again, gunshot to the head. I think he was found dead in a car. No wife, no kids. Not sure what his social life was like exactly, but who knows what the deal was there. So it's one of these things. Maybe something as well, too, that as with so many of these different cases, will never be fully revealed as far as the truth is concerned. So it'll be left simply to speculation. People, well, maybe out there on a ground level, boots on the ground. If you see something, say something. Just be careful of how you go about doing it, would be my advice. So, but make sure you definitely do say something so that people do know. Because if we keep things to ourselves, a lot of times it doesn't end up well. That at least if these matters are out on the table, become part of public record, it's, you know, at least something that can be worked with and help us to see things in a clearer light. So, carpetbaggers, after the Civil War, the carpetbaggers were representatives that came from the north that took over the southern governments. Yes, that's what William was laying out there. Golden Dawn before Crowley got kicked out. LOL. Civil War era before Freemasons and other groups everywhere. That's interesting. Makes me think of Albert Pike. So, yeah, we've pretty much run the course here. I just thought that we would revisit, take a look at those comments. Thanks to everybody. What is it? We've got close to, 10 people holding strong here, so that's very much appreciated. Hopefully you got something out of the conversation. It was great to have William back. Don't forget, you can follow up all the links that we have provided for you down there in the show description area. That's the way to do things if you're interested in getting in touch with either William or myself. Us here at Pirate Radio Podcasts, WPRPN.com. That is the website to drop by. You can subscribe, sign up for free, as well as work on getting a hold of a more premium type way of doing things. A social media blog hub type space of sorts for $60 a year from a private or personal standpoint. And if you're hawking some merchandise of some sort, that's going to cost you a little more. It's $90 a year for anything along commercial lines. So we started things a couple hours early here this go round. I myself didn't get too much sleep actually last night, believe it or not. So I might have been a little bit off my game and out of sorts. It's a kind of mental, intellectual yoga, believe it or not. Working on doing what we can to maintain a quality stream of consciousness that keeps people entertained, informed, captivated to some extent, intrigued, you name it. So, but a big word of thanks, of course, as always, to the people who have joined us. You are the ones who really make the network what it is. WPRPN, World Pirate Radio Podcast Network, the People's Pirate Network. We're pretty underground, independent, online, open-sourced outfit at this particular moment, but we continue to grow and to expand on a daily basis, so that's good to see. And we've got a lot of work on a multitude of fronts. All we're saying is that if you are interested in becoming more engaged and approaching things in a more hands-on way of doing things, reach out to us at Pirate One Radio at either gmail.com or Pirate One Radio at protonmail.com. Of course, I myself can be found on minds.com, Jaffe Ryder. Our main channel on Minds is simply Pirate Radio Network. We got the news coming up this Tuesday, and we do have another, hopefully is what it's looking like, first hour guest. It's a new way of doing things as far as the production of shows. Over the last little while, had a number of people drop by as feature guests for that first hour before we actually turn the focus to unpacking the week's news, various current events and the like, whether pop culture, politics, esoteric matters, science and technology. It really doesn't matter. Anything is on the table, and as long as we think that it's something that the world wants to know more about and that they deserve to at least hear about and to consider, reflect upon, we're going to definitely do our job in helping to make that happen. Present to you these various news items, a little bit of discussion and analysis and conversation along the way as well too. Let's not forget Barbecue Jim dropping by here right at the closing moments. We could do an after show as well too. So if there are people on Skype that want to drop by and work on producing a Rogues Gallery episode, the premium content, by all means, hit me up here on Skype, Jaffe.Rider89, and we can make that happen. So, all right. Well, as always, I try to get all the bases covered here, of course, and pretty much just doing everything off the top of my head, as a few of you probably can imagine. But just in closing, one of the things we should remind people is to like, if that's what you so choose, comment, share our various items that we put out there. We publish the content that we share with people through either Facebook, Minds, Twitter, you name it. And here on YouTube, after you subscribe, hit the notification button so that you can do your best to stay in the loop. We are working on making the transition to DLive. Of course, our channel over there has, for the moment, been deactivated, but we're hoping to be back up in place in the next couple of weeks. We did reach out to them requesting that our channel be reinstalled or implemented. They have yet to get back to us, unfortunately. That's just the nature of the beast, I suppose. Hashtag big media, well, big tech, hashtag Kraken. We'll see how it goes, though, over on DLive. Very much looking forward to that, getting away from using YouTube. They're no longer trustworthy in any way, frankly. So we're going to do what we can, putting our money where our mouths are, voting with our computer mice, and getting the hell off of here as soon as we can possibly manage. It's not easy. Myself, no formal training, of course, in broadcasting or digital media in any way whatsoever. It's all been pretty much just pick up and learn on the fly what I've been able to. Kind of almost through osmosis, I suppose. Wherever little tips or bits of advice and so forth managed to make their appearance or present themselves, shall we say. So, all right. Well, I think we've pretty much done it then. Hopefully got everything addressed and covered here. Let's not forget, we do have actually Jason Bassler via the Free Thought Project. Don't know how many of you out there have actually heard of the Free Thought Project, but they were kicked off of Facebook. I'm not sure about other outlets or not, but really quite bizarre, the reasons that were given, of course. And largely they are an outfit that focuses on, well, reporting on certain stories that other major outlets choose to ignore. They simply refuse to touch for whatever reason. So, but as engaged citizens, of course, we all know this is our, some would say, sacred duty. Every time, duty in the sense of what we are morally obligated, bound in partaking in. Every time I use that word, I think of how little kids they talk about their duty. So when you're about 2 or 3 years old, it's just one of those silly little things, I guess. So I'll have to get out of the habit, letting that override my thought process here, come popping out from out of the back of my head. It's kind of funny though too at the same time. It's our sacred duty. Oh, there we go. There's where's my sacred duty? Yay! Did it again! Yay! So, all right. Okay, well, here we go. Off to the after show. Thanks to William Ramsey. I know he did his best. He was on a tight schedule. He did throw us a bit of a curveball there as well, too. There wasn't too much time left to go before we launched into things here with the show, and suddenly he was informing us that he would not be able to make the regular scheduled 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time launch, as is so typically the case here, of course, and most of our listeners are well accustomed to that, but we had to pretty much take whatever action was necessary and act on the fly to accommodate him. So a lot of great content delivered on his part, though. Hope you did enjoy it. Very informative and insightful. All right, so thanks to everyone once again. Barbecue Jim coming in a little late there, but you did manage to make it, and that's right. Yeah, he was actually our feature guest in the first hour this past Tuesday discussing the USS Liberty. He's in the process right now of helping to put together something with one of the actual vets, somebody who found themselves on the ship itself the day so many servicemen lost their lives. He was there. I'm not sure if he was wounded necessarily or not. Anything like that, of course, is bound to leave its scars, from a traumatic point of view, of course. So it'll be really great talking to the gentleman he has in mind, and who apparently has agreed to join us here. So we're very much looking forward to that. We'll probably book something have it set up as a Friday night feature show, of course. Give listeners the full meal deal, the entire package, of course. Just showing our respects, doing what other news outlets in the mainstream, the corporate folks, really choose to ignore and not talk about for some strange reason. But we feel morally obligated and bound. Just in the same way as with what happened recently with D-Day. That's, I've got a few vet stories to share myself, just going back to where I found myself in Canada back in the day out there on the west coast of British Columbia. Whole number of old World War II vets I came to know over the years. Some really great people for sure. Most of them now gone. A lot of great stories, though. A lot of inspiration. And they really served as pretty decent quality role models, I would say, as far as their characters were concerned in particular. We can maybe get into that in more detail at some future date. Maybe when we produce this Friday night feature show covering the attack, Israel's outright assault of the USS Liberty back in June of 1967. So on that note, yes, we are off to the after show. Feel free, anyone out there, to, if you are interested at all in being a part of things, join us here in the Rogues Gallery. It's been a blast. We've gone nearly 2 hours now, and of course I've just taken the ball and ran with things after William managed to make his way on out the door in somewhat of a hurry, of course, as listeners would have picked up on. I think there was the sound of a car horn in the background there. It sounded like that was his ride. Ronald Kukal, that's right. There we go. That's who we'll be having join us here, hopefully some point. Probably, I'm guessing, if possible, in the next couple of weeks. All right. I don't know. Are you late or are we early? We were early this go round, Joe. It's Pirate Joe Emanon warning what the deal is here. I guess a little confused, of course. But helping to bring things together now to the point where we've managed to actually chalk up a total of 12 people here joining us live with this YouTube stream. Episode number 146, Pirate Radio Podcast. Thanks so much to everybody. Hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you again same time as always. Unlike what we had to deal with this go around, but 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Tuesday night, 11 out on the East Coasts, Chicago, New York, Miami, and in Asia here, Tokyo and Seoul, 12 p.m. noon. Until we meet again out in the high digital seas, on behalf of Captain Long John Sinclair and all the rest of the crew here aboard the Robin Hood, I'm your host as always, the show's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder.
I know. There we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments, checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time, once again, to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay, draw an end to yet another week of World Pirate Radio Live. Remember, if you're looking for a little more animated online action, keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery after show coming up for the next hour in one of our more premium exclusive and remote digital underground online pirate hideaways. Also, if you yourself have a new, novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email via pirateoneradio@gmail.com. We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes. WPRPN.com network subdomain links are also now available. Great for artists, musicians, podcasters, bloggers, social media personalities, or pretty much just any old landlubber looking to boost their online visibility, presence, and reach. Basic personal profile accounts can be launched for just $60 per year. Staking your claim now helps not only strengthen you and the network, we're also looking out for the little guy. That's right, folks. As much as half of all WPRPN's profits are redirected right back into the hands of the people who really need it most. Community charity. After all, we are the Robin Hood. You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, sharing, commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook, Google+, or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.